Hi, I'm Jim Zylstra, and this is my wife, Marilyn. Many years ago, we bought a 1930 Ford, and the purpose of buying that Ford was so that I could work on it with my son, Todd. And Todd is now long gone out of the house, and I had to decide whether I was going to restore that on my own or whether I was going to sell it or what. I restored it, and it took a long, long time. And the hardest part in the restoration is when I had to dig a very large pit, and then every time when I got paid, I'd have to throw money into that pit. But I got over that, and the unfortunate part about that pit is that the amount of money that I threw in there was far greater than the investment that I have, that I could expect, I should say, from this vehicle. But it was fun, and I made some friends along the way, and we've had some fun along the way. Now, Marilyn is standing next to me, and if I wanted to, I could show you places on the car that I might normally point to and say, yes, my wife. They are little places where I was responsible for causing some problems. One problem was very interesting, and if I can take just a moment to point that problem out. The roof was being glued and was being put into place, and I wanted the glue to dry, so I had some very, very heavy weights, and I put them on the top, and then I went to bed that night, and I got up in the morning, and the weights were not there. They had fallen off, unfortunately. There's no way they could fall off the roof without hitting parts of the car. So I have some lovely places that I could point out where there was an error made in my judgment. But enough of that. My wife, Marilyn, has some things to say, as usual.
Well, when I was growing up, I remember my dad having a Henry J, a little car.
Those were so ugly.
And we traveled to the west in that Henry J, about 4 of us, I guess, in the car. And I remember a Willys Overland Jeep when I was young also that my dad had. I remember. He also had Buicks. He was very fond of the Buick line of cars. Other cars that Jim and I have had, we've had some foreign cars. Some of them were not so successful. We even had a Mercedes for a while, but it was rusted out on the bottom and there were holes going through the floor. And we had Saab for a while, and we had Peugeot in Africa when we lived there. And we also had a Ford Escort in Africa. So we've had a variety of cars. And I can't say that I really was so terribly fond of any one of them. I didn't grit my teeth, but it certainly took a lot of time on Jim's part and a little time on my part. I helped him with the upholstery, and I helped him with the roof, sealing the roof on, and I helped him with a few other things, like painting the bumpers right here, the little details on the bumpers.
So where have you gone with this car? Have you gone on any cruises or what?
Windsor.
Oh, we went to Windsor, Canada. We went to Indiana on a little tour to a village there. I forget the name of it. Somewhat like Greenfield Village, but it was a little Amish village.
Sure. I know that was a couple hundred miles away from you, isn't it? 150 miles?
About 150.
So
no.
Now where's the car going to end up?
It's going to end up at my son's place in Colorado. And he has a wide open country there. He can drive it all around.
Why doesn't Todd get it? Because he bailed?
No, Todd doesn't really want it. He sees it as a liability. And he doesn't have room for it in his garage. But Trevor is going to give up his space in the garage for the Ford.
Was Brandon even considered in this situation, or what?
He was considered. I don't think he has space for it either. And we talked to all three of them as far as who would get it.
Paying for 3 houses, as I recall.
I think so. I think that's true.
Here we are at Henry Ford Estate at the Fairlane Manor, and I would like to mention something. I've always had a prejudice for Ford motor cars. When I was a young child, maybe 10, 11, 12 years of age, I used to stand on the corner where I lived, and a friend of mine and myself would listen to the cars, and we would turn our faces from the approaching vehicle and predict what make it was. And we got pretty good at it. The Ford vehicles generally had a fairly distinctive sound. You could often tell when there was a V8 coming, and usually you could distinguish from the exhaust system and so on what the sound was without looking at the vehicle approaching. So here we were, young little pre-teens, standing on the street corner with nothing more to do than to try to figure out what the car was that was approaching. So I've been a little bit prejudiced. I learned to drive on a 1936 Ford pickup truck, and that was always interesting because when you had wintertime and there was no weight in the box, you had to be very careful that you didn't get stuck. And if you did get stuck, it was a challenge if you were all alone. I recall getting stuck with my dad's 36 Ford pickup, and there was no choice but to put the car into gear, get the wheels spinning, get out of the car, and push. But then, of course, you had to run real fast to get back into the car to command control again. But back to Ford, there's always been a little bit of a prejudice, and it was interesting back in the early days when there weren't the kind of competition with foreign makes that we have now. But as a young child, you could look at a Accord and you could look at a Duesenberg and all the exotic makes that were from this country and grow up with a fondness for motor vehicles.
Okay, I'd like to just mention something about Dearborn, Michigan. Dearborn is the home of Henry Ford, and there are so many reminders in Dearborn of Henry Ford everywhere you go. Henry Ford Centennial Library, Henry Ford Museum, the Ford World Headquarters, even the street names like Rotunda, which commemorated the big Rotunda building that was once owned by Ford, and the big complex. What is it called, Jim? The complex of Ford Motor Company in Dearborn.
The Rouge plant?
The Rouge plant, a huge complex of factories, steel mills, and everything else. So this home was owned by Henry Ford, and he really did a lot for the city of Dearborn, and we'd just like to appreciate that.